Welcome to a lesson on percent equations. When working with situations involving percents, one of the most reliable solution methods is to translate the given problem into an equation. And here are things to look for. First, the unknown. Always start by identifying what it is you are trying to find. The percent. If given, you will need to convert this to decimal form before doing any calculations. If you are asked to determine the percent, then you will need to convert your answer from decimal form to percent form. Multiplication. Replace the word of with multiplication. Equals. Look for words like is or becomes and replace with an equal sign. So to summarize, is means equals, of means multiply, and what represents the unknown, so we write down the variable. Let's look at some examples. For each of the following, first translate into a percent equation, then solve the equation. So 1a, the question is, what is 12% of 20? So notice how the first word we see is what, so we write down the variable or the unknown. Let's go ahead and use x. Is means equals. Now here we have 12%. Remember, if we have a percentage, we must express this as a decimal. 12% is equal to 0.12. Of means multiplication, so we have times, and then we have 20. So notice how to solve this equation for x. In this example, we just need to find this product. 0.12 times 20 is equal to 2.4. So here we have x equals 2.4, which means 2.4 is 12% of 20. B, 60% of what is 15? So writing our equation, the first thing we see is 60%. 60% as a decimal would be 0.60. Of means multiplication, so we have times. What represents the unknown? Again, let's go ahead and use x. Is means equals, and then we have 15. So our equation is 0.60 times x equals 15. Well, 0.60 can be simplified to 0.6. 0.6 times x would be 0.6x equals 15. Solve for x, we divide both sides by 0.6. Simplifying on the left, we just have 1 times x or x. And now we'll find this quotient. 15 divided by 0.6 or 0.6 equals 25. Which means 60% of 25 is 15. Part C, what percent of 140 is 3.5? Notice how the first word we see is what, but it says what percent, so the unknown is going to be a percent. Let's go ahead and use the variable p for this. So we have p. Of means multiplication, so p times 140 is means equals, and then we have 3.5. So we need to remember here that because we're finding a percent, when we solve for p, we'll get a decimal, which we must then convert to a percent. Well, p times 140 equals 140p equals 3.5. To solve for p, we'll divide both sides by 140. Simplifying on the left, we have p equals, and now we'll find our quotient, which will give us a decimal value of our percent. So 3.5 divided by 140 is equal to 0.025, or if we want 0.025. To convert to a percent, move the decimal point to the right 2 places and add a percent sign, so the percent is 2.5%. So we found that 2.5% of 140 is 3.5. Now let's look at an application problem. A lender requires a minimum down payment of 16% of the value of the home. What is the required down payment for a $180,000 home? Many times when solving word problems, if we can simplify the question, it makes it easier to write the equation. So because the down payment requirement is 60% of the value of the home, we can simplify this question by asking, what is 16% of $180,000? Looking at the simplified question, the first word we see is the word what, which represents the unknown. Let's use the variable d for down payment. So we'll say d. Over here on the left, let's say d equals the down payment. So we have d, then we have is, which means equals. 16% as a decimal would be 0.16. Of means multiplication, so times, and then we have 180,000. So we have d equals this product, so we'll go back to the calculator. 0.16 or 0.16 times 180,000 is equal to 28,800. Which means the required down payment would be $28,800. Part B, you have $23,500 in cash available to use as a down payment toward a home. Determine the maximum home value that you can finance. Again, this is assuming that the down payment must be 16% of the value of the home. To simplify this question, we want to know $23,500 is 16% of what? Or for the unknown this time, let's use the variable v, which would be equal to the value of the home. So for our equation, we have 23,500 is means equals. 16% of the decimal would be 0.16. Of means multiplication, so times what? And again, we're using the variable v for the value of the home. So our equation is 23,500 equals 0.16 v. So to solve for v, we'll divide both sides by 0.16. Notice on the right side, this simplifies to 1v or v. So now we'll find this quotient to find the value of v. So we have $23,500 divided by 0.16, which equals 146,875. So to answer the question, the maximum home value you can finance is $146,875, given you have $23,500 in cash available for a down payment. Okay, I hope you found this helpful.